Depression is a common problem. As a family physician, I see people that are struggling with abnormalities of their brain every day. Many times, people have an unclear understanding of what depression is about and what causes it. Depression is a problem in the brain that is generally inherited. It arises in an area of the brain called the limbus of the brain. And the problem is that certain messenger chemicals called neurotransmitters are exhausted, are depleted, and when that happens, there are several predictable symptoms that people have. These symptoms include, number one, difficulty sleeping. People come in and say, Dr. Bruce, I can't turn my mind off at night. I lay there for over half an hour, sometimes 2 or 3 hours or more, before I can finally drift off to sleep. Sometimes they go to sleep, but then at 2 or 3 in the morning they awaken and again cannot turn off their mind. Interestingly, in young people, instead of difficulty sleeping, they want to sleep all the time, beyond the typical teenager tendency to sleep more than when they were younger. But sleep disorder is a very prominent symptom. Fatigue goes along with that. Fragile emotions, the propensity to cry more easily than normal. Irritability is a third symptom to watch for. Commonly headaches. Headaches are very commonly a symptom of depression. The icing on the cake for the diagnosis of depression is suicidal ideation flashing through one's mind. I've suffered with depression for decades. My mama was real depressive. I inherited those genes from her. I passed them on to my daughter, unfortunately. I fell to the conclusion that I was depressed one day as I was driving home from my residency. And I found that this thought flashed through my mind: if you turned your steering wheel and ran into a bridge above it ahead, I would escape the pain that I was experiencing. I thought, uh-oh, I'm depressed. Started taking medicines, which at that time, 3 decades ago, maybe 4, were not nearly as efficient or side effect free as they are now. But after 2 weeks and putting up with pesky side effects, I felt well. I struggled off and on trying to stop the medicine. My wife would notice that I wasn't right. She'd tell me to get back on the medicine. Probably 30 years ago, I decided I needed to stay on it continuously. And as I have done that, I'm as normal as I ever get, which is pretty functional, and certainly have been blessed by modern medical science in the realm of depression. I think it's important to tell you also what depression is not. Depression is not, typically at least, a illness that God has caused because of people's sinfulness. If depression was a punishment for sin, then we would all be depressed. And some families, meaner than snakes, never have a depressed day in their life. It is true that sin causes increasing stress in our lives, and anything that increases stress can unmask one's inherited tendency to be depressed. So yes, if you're hiding a double life, if you're having an affair on your spouse, you might become increasingly depressed because of the extra stresses that stimulates. But it is not the underlying cause of the depression. In any event, for those of us that are suffering from depression, there is a fix for that. I will say one other thing about depression. Counseling is never wrong. The counselor's job is to help us identify strategies for reducing the stressors that help unmask our inherited tendency. You've heard the adage about we carry around excess baggage. The counselor's job is to help us unpack the extra baggage and repack only the parts that are important for us to carry around. I hope this helps. Talk to your family physician if you have issues with depression. Your pastor, Dan, is a near expert on the topic. And I wish you a good day.